Hi everyone, I'm Chris Frame and welcome back to my channel. The QE2 is perhaps one of the most famous ships of modern time, and if you've been a subscriber here for any period of time, you'll know that she's still my absolute favourite ship, and with good reason. The QE2 was built at a time when the critics thought that ocean liner travel was over, and yet she went on to serve for 39.5 years. And despite the fact that the ship was in service for such a long period of time, there are still some interesting things about her that you might not know. So today we're going to look at 5 things about the QE2 that you might not have heard of. So let's go on board the world's most famous passenger ship, and if you do like this kind of content, don't forget to subscribe because there's lots more videos like this on my channel. Number 5. The QE2 was built at a time when people thought ocean liner travel was over. QE2's construction took place in the 1960s, and by this stage the jet aircraft was already wreaking havoc on transatlantic ocean liners and passenger shipping around the world. And in fact, QE2 was actually the last large ocean liner built in the 1960s. However, QE2 was more successful than her contemporaries for one particular reason. QE2 was built as a dual-purpose liner. Cunard's original plan wasn't to build a dual-purpose liner at all. In fact, it was to build a ship of very similar dimensions and scale to the original Cunard Queens, over 1,000 feet in length, too large to fit through the Panama Canal. However, Cunard needed government funding to build this new ship that they'd codenamed Q3. The government wasn't willing to fund a ship that they saw as a white elephant, and so Cunard had to go back to the drawing board. What emerged was plans for a new liner, Q4, and this ship was smaller than her predecessors, allowing the ship to undertake transits of the Panama Canal and go cruising during the northern winter. This ship was designed as an ocean liner. She could do the direct transatlantic crossings and she was very, very fast. However, she also had a number of amenities built into her that allowed her to be a successful cruise ship. This included large lido decks, huge open areas for passengers to sunbathe, swimming pools on the aft of the ship, and air conditioning throughout, as well as private en-suites in all of the cabins, and that became essential for her long-term survival. When QE2 entered service in 1969, the British press thought that she was going to be a failure. However, the public fell in love with her, and with this they started to book cruises and transatlantic crossings on board QE2. The ship's success meant that she started to grow in popularity and eventually became a very successful ship financially, even during the stresses of the 1970s with high fuel prices. As a result of this, Cunard was able to repay their government loan, and QE2 went on to serve for almost 40 years. Number 4. A father and a son both commanded QE2. QE2's first captain was Captain Bill Warwick, who actually stood by the ship during her construction. Captain Warwick was a captain of the original Cunard Queens, but he went on to stand by QE2 during the construction period as she was being built in the shipyard in Clydebank. He further became the ship's first captain, overseeing the sea trials and then taking her into service. He commanded the ship during her maiden voyage and during her early seasons of cruising. And it was during this time that his son, Ron Warwick, joined the QE2. Ron worked his way up through the ranks, and his father later retired. Ultimately, in 1990, Ron Warwick became the master of the QE2 and took command of the ship from Captain Robin Woodall. This was a momentous occasion in Cunard's history because it took place during the 150th anniversary and signified the first time that a father and a son had both commanded the same Cunard liner. Captain Ron Warwick went on to command Queen Mary II as her first captain before retiring. And so the Warwicks have a very dear place in the hearts of QE2 fans and QM2 fans alike. Number 3. The QE2 went to war. Yes, that's right. The Queen Mary and Queen Elizabeth, we all know, went to war during World War II to operate as troop carriers. But what you might not know is that QE2 followed this tradition when she was called into service for use as a troop ship during the Falklands War in the 1980s. In fact, in 1982, when the QE2 was requisitioned, the news of the requisition slipped out and was reported on the BBC radio. And the QE2's captain and officers found out that their ship had been requisitioned via the radio before they'd actually been informed officially by the British government. QE2 was on a voyage at the time, so she returned to Southampton. Her passengers were disembarked, and a team of people came on board the ship to start converting her into a troop carrier. This work was done very, very quickly as the QE2 was needed in the South Atlantic as soon as possible. Works included installing protective panels throughout the ship, and the massive amount of work that was required to cut away the aft decks of the vessel to install helipads, because QE2 would sail with Sea King helicopters on board for use in the Falklands conflict. It took about a week for the works to be completed, which is extremely fast for the amount of conversion work that was done. QE2 then set sail with 3,000 troops of the 5th Infantry Brigade, the Scots Guards and the Gurkhas on board. She then set sail for the South Atlantic, where she rendezvoused with the P&O liner Canberra and transferred her troops across, with Canberra ultimately taking the troops into the thick of the war zone. QE2 then took on the survivors of the HMS Ardent, Antelope and Coventry and sailed back to Southampton, where she was met by the Royal Yacht Britannia with the Queen Mother on board, who sent a telegram across to the ship congratulating them for their efforts during the Falklands War. This video is brought to you by me and my new book, The Evolution of the Passenger Ship. In The Evolution of the Passenger Ship, we've brought years' worth of research together to create a book that takes you on a journey from the dawn of passenger shipping right the way through to the modern behemoths that we see in the cruise market today. By reading this book, you'll understand the transitions that have taken place as ships have developed from small sailing vessels to massive modern-day cruise ships. The Evolution of the Passenger Ship is available at all good bookshops, and if you make a purchase, you help us by supporting the channel. Thanks so much, and now back to the video. Number 2. The QE2 had two completely different power plants throughout her career. When QE2 was first built in the 1960s, she had a steam turbine power plant installed. The steam turbine power plant was used on many passenger ships, and in fact Cunard had been using it since 1905. This style of engine used boilers to produce steam, which then drove turbines to propel the ship and to create power for the ship's electrical services. However, QE2's steam turbine power plant wasn't overly reliable, and by the 1980s she was suffering from embarrassing and costly breakdowns. Therefore, the decision was made to re-engine the ship, opting to replace the steam turbine plant with a diesel-electric plant built in Germany. As such, the QE2 went to the Lloyd-Werft shipyard in Bremerhaven, Germany, where her steam turbine power plant was removed. In its place, 9 MAN B&W engines were installed of the diesel-electric style. These engines were each about the size of a London double-decker bus. They provided electrical power for the ship, which was then fed off to hotel services, as well as 2 gigantic propulsion motors, which were used to propel the ship. When the QE2 returned to service after her re-engining, she actually achieved a faster maximum speed, clocking in at 34 knots during sea trials. This meant that QE2 easily eclipsed the top speeds recorded of the original Cunard Queens, but was not able to compete for the Blue Riband because her speed was not comparable to that of the SS United States. Number 1. The QE2 carried more passengers than any passenger ship before her, travelling further than any passenger ship ever, and served for 39.5 years. That's right, QE2 was built at a time when the critics said that ocean liners were dead, and yet she went on to become the furthest travelled and most used passenger ship of all time, a record she still holds to this day. The QE2 carried 2.5 million passengers during her service career, thanks in part to the fact that she undertook numerous transatlantic crossings and also global cruising throughout her career. This meant that the ship clocked up 5.8 million nautical miles during her service, which is the most that any passenger ship has ever travelled in history. And of those 2.5 million passengers, most were ordinary people like you and me, who just enjoyed travelling on a very iconic ocean liner. But she also carried some very famous passengers as well. QE2 hosted Princess Diana, Nelson Mandela, and also Her Majesty the Queen. In fact, the Queen sailed on board QE2 in 1990 for a brief period with passengers on board, which was quite an interesting and unusual thing to happen on board a commercial passenger ship. As such, the QE2 has actually flown the Queen's standard from her mast to signify that the monarch was on board the ship. So that's 5 things you might not have known about the QE2, an iconic and famous ship that is well known for all the right reasons. If you found the video interesting, please don't forget to give it a like. And if you're interested in this kind of content, please subscribe to the channel. I'd love to have you on board. My name's Chris Frame, thanks so much for joining me, and until next time, I hope to see you on board. Works included protect the carpeting and the ship's Works included installing carpeting.